Awesome. I don't know why it made us go
It's okay.
vertical.
Doesn't matter.
Thank you, YouTube.
Okay. So the theme of our evening.
Well, first, welcome
yeah.
to our second live stream, which is has its own challenges apparently. But yeah, so today, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about security and safety, which is something we get asked about a lot. But a couple really quick.
Just wanted to sit close together. Yes.
Oh, get closer here. Get even closer.
I can't.
Okay. A couple quick announcements before we get into our content, and that is, do you want to say that coffee is available?
Yeah. So if you've heard us talk about it before, our own coffee from our farm here, we've got it up and available now for sale on our website and our Shopify store. So if you go to our website at averagefamilyabroad.com, you can jump over and visit our store, and there you can buy, we sell either whole bean or ground of medium roast of our coffee, and we sell it by the pound, so they're 1 pound bags.
$15 a pound plus whatever shipping. If you happen to be in the Tacoma or Flagstaff areas, we can help arrange local pickup to help alleviate that price, at least that cost. It's really good coffee. The feedback we get, especially from our growing Ecuadorian clientele, has been very positive. So that's kind of fun.
But yeah, but as a way to support us, and if you're interested in Ecuadorian coffee, please by all means check it out.
Coffee from Loja, where we live, is known to be like the best in all of Ecuador. And Ecuador's coffee is known to be very fine throughout the world. So
even if they don't appreciate it here like they should.
No, they drink it burnt.
And with sugar.
With sugar, yeah. We drink it sugarless,
right.
And it's good. So,
and second announcement, we've actually just filmed a couple of cool new interviews that we'll be putting out here very shortly.
So keep your eye out. One with an immigration attorney, and another with a couple who are building like a sustainable, like Tapia traditional style home here nearby us. So
we think Ecuadorian couple.
Yeah, we think they're really cool, really interesting interviews. So be watching for those videos in the next several weeks. Okay.
Without further ado,
Security.
So, security.
Yeah. And again, thank you all of you for joining us this evening. We hope you are all having lovely evenings. It's very pleasant here. So, okay. We said we get asked a lot about safety and security in Ecuador, which is reasonable. That's mainly by people who are considering a move here, but not always. Those people, of course, are trying to do their due diligence and get an accurate read on the security situation before they commit to a move. And the first thing they find out is that's not so easy to do. So why is that?
Well, it's so you've got lots of factors, right, kind of playing against each other, right, when you're trying to research something like this, and something important like security. And so what we've found so far is that Western media, or kind of media in general, right, they're all about the shock value, right? And so very often they misrepresent kind of the reality of life here or what's going on, or right, they kind of hyper focus on, there are some terrible things that have happened or are happening, but they make it seem like the entire country's on fire, more or less, right? And so, and it's the same, it's around the world, right? All media kind of paints that picture, like blood is what leads, right? Like they want that your views, your clicks. And so that affects people's perceptions of Ecuador, what it's like here, what's going on here. And so that's one big problem. And going along with that is social media, right? So we've given everyone a platform to speak their mind. And even if they don't know what they're talking about. Including us right now. Exactly. We have a little bit more firsthand knowledge.
Yes.
And so social media, right? Like you'll get both sides of the coin, right? You'll get people who, share your experience from.
Yeah. So you could be posting something. You happen to mention you live in Ecuador. And I remember once someone commented like, "Oh, so you want to die?" I'm like, that's not true, or like, what would make you even say something like that to someone? I don't understand.
And it's obviously someone who's never actually even been here or probably knows much about here at all.
And that's just what the culture, right? Everyone's an authority. Everyone has a platform. Everyone feels like they should say the first thing that pops into your head. And so you're getting the media, you're getting, social media. But on the other hand, there is another side. And sometimes also, you may find people who will swear up and down that there is no problem at all, and that, we live in paradise, or, that there's no crime, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong. And so, like, that's also not an accurate take, of course.
For sure. And you've got a lot of things going on right now in Ecuador, and a lot of what you're seeing being reported, or like a lot of the takes of what's going on here, are very much being driven by politics as well. If you've noticed, there's kind of been quite a big shift in Latin America and the recent elections and the leaders that people have chosen throughout Latin America. And so kind of the old guard of the previous generations kind of being removed from power right now. And a lot of that is tied in with the narco stuff, gangs, and kind of global drug trade. And so there's a lot of money and influence being poured in to create narratives and conflict and kind of destabilize elected leaders, right? To make them seem like things are worse under their control. Politics, like anywhere in the world. And so that's another piece, right, that we see going on at the moment. So all of those,
yeah,
right,
all those
together.
factors and more, make the nuanced realities of Ecuador's specific, security situation even harder to sort out, especially for people who haven't spent much time here, but also for Ecuadorians and foreigners. It's complicated. So, but it is a topic that's super important, and it is one that we're actually pretty passionate about, and not just in regards, to Ecuador and our specific situation. But Blake is particularly security minded, and always is kind of invested in security for vulnerable populations in general. And expats and immigrants, no matter where you are in the world, are, quite a vulnerable population. So we do care about expat safety and security. So.
Yeah, and kind of like we've alluded to, we really don't have any skin in this game, right? In terms of how we present the information, right? We show our life here, and we don't benefit necessarily.
We don't care if you move here.
Yeah,
we don't.
We want you to, sure.
Well, yeah, if it's right, but yeah, we're not in an expat like field. We don't in any way benefit financially or any way from people moving. We want people to move here who want to be here and should be here, just because the more the merrier. But yeah, we are. We don't have any incentive to deceive you, and that's the last thing we want to do. So.
Yeah. So again, this is going to be from our perspective and our experience. And like Brittany said, I actually spent a career in more or less, layman's terms, risk analysis and mitigation for all kinds of security risks and disasters and all that kind of stuff. And so it kind of flows naturally into where I've worked. So, and
also this is we are a little bit more, have more authority to speak on this than some foreigners, because Blake is actually one of the leaders of our little town security initiative. We call him the Gringo Liaison, and he works kind of hand in hand with a former police officer who has headed up a pretty complex and like community-wide security and alert system, which has been really, really, really cool and successful. And so Blake has a lot more kind of firsthand inside information and how that all works and stuff. And so, so we're not just coming out of this from nowhere either. And we'll talk more specifically about that, that endeavor here shortly. And please do feel free to, send your questions, and we will try to answer them all as much as possible. If we think that one is going to be answered later on in our content, we may defer. But if it's something that we haven't, addressed or don't plan on addressing, we'll certainly, make that effort. So.
Yeah. All right. So want to get started?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, we want to offer some perspective on the situation here. So Ecuador is currently rated at a level 2 by the U.S. State Department in terms of their travel warnings. But you know what? Other countries are also a level 2 at the moment. Belgium, France, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, Italy. Chile and Uruguay here in South America are also considered level 2s. And so it's one of those, you got to take it with a grain of salt, right? Like there are things you need to be aware of, and you shouldn't walk into any situation without knowledge. But it is not the Mad Max style and environment.
Every man for himself.
Yeah, environment that you see. I mean, yes, there are problems, and we'll talk about that, but it's nothing at all like portrayed. And so again, it's one of those things where, like, there's actually travel warnings. Other countries have travel warnings about heading to the United States, right? Like they say, hey, cautious if you go to the US, specifically if you go to certain cities. Like they have warnings for New York City, they have warnings for Chicago, various big cities in the United States, right? And so other countries are warning their citizens not even to travel to the US. So you got to take that, right, and understand that it's just the nature of what governments do and just how they evaluate risks, right? And so again, it's there are things happening in Ecuador that you need to be aware of.
But at the same time, Cuenca, just north of where we are, was recently named the safest city in South America by, what is that?
I don't know.
Numbeo.
Statistically speaking, it's a very safe city.
Yeah, super dangerous country, but safest city. It's like, there's something doesn't quite add up. So you have to just, the nuances again.
Yeah, and it's just like any country in the world where you've got pockets or places, neighborhoods, like we say, there may be, a problem in a very specific part of one city in a country, right? But then the whole rest of the country is fine. And so it's very much that way here. Most of the crime is very much centralized in very specific locations.
Which we'll talk about.
So
one thing we have kind of come to understand clearer since living here is that I think in just about any country in the world, with some notable exceptions, you can live a pretty ordinary life in relative peace and safety, at least in some regions. Some places are more prosperous or more comfortable than others, but you can build a beautiful, meaningful life almost anywhere, depending on, your specific, needs and circumstances. So, and the same is true of Ecuador.
All right. So what do you want to do? The two main categories?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk about security on the national level, and then more specifically security on the local level, right? Because you need to know both and focus, or have
keep both in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Shane said he spent a month in Vilcabamba last year and felt safer there than he does in Canada. So
yeah. I mean,
where we moved from, outside of Tacoma, Washington, it's always on the news for drive-by shootings and murder and drugs and home invasions, and it's the only place I've ever had my car broken into.
Oh yeah.
It's but you don't think about it, like it's just
you accept it because it's your risk, right? And our kids have much more freedom, for instance, here than they did in Tacoma, but maybe that wouldn't have been the case, in a small Midwestern town or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And we will talk about the known versus the unknown, and also something we champion a lot is the fact that typically in Ecuador, crime is logical. And we'll talk a lot about that, whereas crime in the US feels very random, and that kind of scares us a little bit more. It scares me, you can caught up in something that's that you have much less control over, whereas logical crime can, be mitigated against. Not always. We will say stuff can happen anywhere. And so, we definitely don't think that this place is perfect by a long shot, and we don't think anywhere is. So
yeah, so as a jumping off point, the vast majority of crime right now in Ecuador is tied directly to the drug trade, right? And so that's the cartels and the local gangs who partner with the cartels, right, to make money off of that drug trade and whatnot. And so if you're not specifically into the drug trade, if that's not what you want to be a part of, your risk of getting caught up in that violence is fairly low.
Yeah, really low. Higher in some geographic areas of being, a statistic. Like, what is that called?
The gangs had felt more emboldened recently in these last couple of years. And so if you live in their neighborhood, right, yes, there's a higher percentage chance
you get just caught up. Yeah.
Caught up in something for sure. But again, that is very specific to like neighborhoods of Guayaquil in particular. Where like the vast majority of the 2+ million, almost 3 million people that live in Guayaquil are completely unaffected and have everyday normal lives, right? There are very specific pockets where the crime mostly is, right? And it is terrible. But again, it's just like if you lived in LA, vast majority of people in LA don't experience the problems that the few who venture into bad parts do or live in bad parts of town. So very similar to that. And like Brittany said, this crime is very much logical, right? And so it's not random. Now, granted, you can always have random crime.
Yeah, and you
people
will.
are
There
people
will
all
be
over the world.
things.
But the vast majority of this crime and security issues here in Ecuador are tied to drug and gang related activity. There is some stuff like illegal mining that happens in the jungle, which is
So say, don't open an illegal gold mine in the Amazon, and you're highly unlikely to get caught up in that.
Yeah,
So,
and so the bigger security concerns, right, are those kind of activities. And so as long as you're not in any way associated with that, or if you're
hanging out with people who are,
like
patroning places that are known to be,
like here in Loja, things are very, very quiet majority of the time. Stuff happens here, of course. It's a city. But anytime there is like someone gets shot or something, which is fairly rare, but when it does happen now, people are like, oh yeah, of course, they're tied in with drugs.
Yeah, of course.
It makes sense.
The other issue is the occasional domestic violence, which again, not random. So, so that should be comforting, right? I mean, it's not like, oh, we're 100% safe because we don't, of course, like we said, things can happen, but
like you're saying, it's not the random violence and random crime that you see in parts of the United States today and other countries, right? Where it's a lot of mental illness.
Much less mental illness here, much less drug use. The drugs pass through Ecuador, but Ecuadorians by and large are not a drug consuming culture. And so that is much less of a factor in crime.
Drugs aren't really even produced here, right?
Oh, no.
They're coming from
they just pass
north
through.
Or south, right? Yeah, the ports are being used to ship drugs out of Ecuador. And so that is the problem. And really the problem started when the current administration, the current president, when he came into office, really ratcheted up his attack on the drug cartels. And there's lots of politics.
We don't want to get into politics.
No, we don't get into politics. But
yuck, politics.
As a response to his efforts to crack down on things, that's when a lot of the stuff you saw on the news started to happen.
Which has been simmering, especially since COVID. There has been an increase, but that's why it was in the news, a couple of years ago, particularly. So, but again, the crime in Tacoma, you never knew. Like I looked for exits in grocery stores. We don't do that here. That's just not a thing, and let's pray it never becomes a thing here. It's logical. And even crime, which we will talk about, that could be targeted at expats, is also logical and can be prepared against. And so
you can mitigate for these things.
Yes.
And so that's one of the positives. The silver lining, not silver lining, but the positives to the situation is it's not random chaos and violence everywhere. What do they say? It's 5 spots or something like that.
I don't know.
I can't remember but it's very specific locations where most of this national security issues are happening.
And it's a moving and changing always. This is today. This reflects the reality. Next week may be different. Hopefully better, maybe worse. Like we always, we follow the news and we do keep an eye on things and we talk to people. But national security is not a major preoccupation of ours at this point.
And so for, what was I going to say about Ecuador? So the crime here is knowable, right? Like you can know what to expect and how to deal with it, more or less.
And we'll get there shortly.
Yep.
But along those lines, like we said, immigrants and expats are a vulnerable population. And it is important for immigrants and expats to educate themselves on potential risks and, the correct mitigation of those risks and, also the response protocols, which are going to be different than you are used to coming from the United States or, other places. Are there any questions we need to catch up on? Have you been monitoring?
Yeah, I'm watching.
Okay.
But no, some funny ones, but no, it's true. Like I said, even in the United States, right, wherever you live, if you live rurally and that sort of thing, like there are precautions and things you should take into effect.
Yeah, I mean, we did you don't even really think about it necessarily because you accept those risks as you live there. And the same thing. And again, everything we're saying is a generalization. You could easily point a finger and be like, well, I know someone. It's like, yes, of course you do. This is broad strokes. There are always exceptions. And so just, we're saying that now. We know there are exceptions. So let's see. We talked about the complex security situation, drug trade, narco gangs. That sounds terrible and is terrible.
Sounds much like a movie.
Yeah. And then adjacent crimes, I guess, that do follow
Yeah.
drugs.
Yeah. So like I was saying, the
Intimidation
things. Yeah. So the gangs, right, now that they're emboldened, have a new kind of income source, right? They feel, and new weapons and that kind of stuff, right? That they've increased since COVID, these intimidation kind of, where they go by businesses and require businesses to pay them, just mafia stuff, right? They call it mafia, right? But so those kind of like crimes. So if you live in their territory, right, you have a business in their territory, right? There is those instances where they've been, taking money from business owners and stuff like that for protection, that usual kind of racket. And so that kind of stuff has gone along with it for sure.
Yeah.
And again, it's so specific generally to different areas, on the coast mostly.
And I mean, the police, like, they crack down on those things. It's not like we don't have law enforcement, they're pretty good.
But that and neighborhoods too.
Yeah.
Like specifically in the Sierra where we live in the mountains, they're really good about getting into community justice. So sometimes, these guys will get caught and then you'll find them in the nude, strapped to a pole in the middle of town. And they've been...
and people say, yes, that is acceptable and appropriate. And we won't get into the morality of that, but that's how it is here. Not everywhere.
So,
But
I say Ecuadorians aren't taking it lying down.
No.
This is new for Ecuador,
Yeah.
right? This hasn't been historically.
They're a peaceful population, and they're not okay with their country experiencing this
very
violence.
different culturally than Mexico or Colombia, which are historically, right, very, very prominent in the narco world.
Yeah, but people still travel there and enjoy those, also beautiful, vibrant cultures. And so I don't know. It's not fair that people pick on Ecuador.
Yeah.
Poor little Ecuador.
Has there been any ever spillover violence into the local schools?
No,
not really.
No, not at all. I mean,
there
again, if there were any violence in not in our local schools, but I'm thinking Guayaquil, like any student like who may be, I don't know, killed, like they're connected to the drug trade in some way. Like there's not school violence.
That's not really an issue. When this started, I mean, they were posting police officers at schools, and we even have one in our little town. A police officer will be there just to watch his kids go out of school and stuff. But there hasn't been anything direct. When there were Zoom classes, right, when distance learning was happening, there were a few instances, right, where someone would get on a Zoom, right, and threaten a teacher or something like that. But in all reality, no, not.
Yeah, and let's hope that always is the case. Again, I don't want to generalize, but like mental health is a lot better here among young people. And I do think, tragically in the United States, everyone knows that is a significant issue.
And the gangs here are traditional gangs, right? Like they're disaffected youth with,
not just from Ecuador either. There are Venezuelans, Colombians.
Yeah, a lot of immigrants. But it's the same kind of reasons that you have youth getting into gangs in the U.S. and other countries, right? It's the money, the power, the group, tribal kind of aspect to it.
Well, and there's unemployment or underemployment.
That's what I mean. And so it's the same kind of factors, right? So it's different than the U.S., right? Where it still happens in the U.S., but I mean the mental illness side that you worry about with certain randomness in the U.S. But anyways. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know, we're curious to see, like I said, the situation could certainly get worse. There's a lot of outside factors, including the U.S. involvement in the region, which I don't know, good, bad, I don't know. Our Venezuelan friends are actually pretty excited right now, but I don't want to say like what should happen. But that kind of thing could make things better or worse. There's a lot of talk about reopening U.S. military bases on Ecuadorian soil, which could make things better or worse on the national level. All sorts of things, even as much as like a factor is, the crop conditions for the cocaine crops in other countries, like that will impact. Like there's so many things, and
Sure.
It's like ultimately, as we're going to say, like your local security at a local level is, I think I would say more important, more day-to-day important than at the national level.
No, and again, like we've said before, if we didn't have the news, we wouldn't know anything was happening at all, just because in the vast majority of Ecuador, things are pretty much normal. People are living their lives and going about life like normal. And so, like I said, even most parts of Guayaquil and other towns on the coast.
Yeah, we were in Guayaquil just a couple of years ago, kind of in the middle of this, and normal.
Yeah, people are just carrying on with their lives. It's not, like I said, it's not like a movie. I mean, there are scenes and times where it's dramatic, but it is nothing like you see on the news.
We were
It's not
joking,
a constant war zone.
We should like scroll through one of the major newspapers, like Facebook, feed. I was actually just waiting. I was like, oh, what's going to happen today? Because we're doing the security live stream. There's going to be some major, something that's gonna. But it's like, and if you look at it, it's soccer this, oh, it's influencer that, oh, it's new textbooks, or it's just daily life. And then that's the reality for most people most of the time here. So,
okay.
All right. So moving sort of to the local level, your specific neighborhood and your specific town is where you really need to be concerned about safety and security. And so moving on to that part too, I think that, for the most part, expats, you need to do what you do in your home country without really thinking about it in order to promote your safety here. You have to be a little bit more intentional on a number of levels. And in my mind, there are kind of three steps that go into that. And one is you need to accept the risks of your new home, which means you need to know them and like be educated about them. And you need to decide for yourself, like, okay, can I deal with that? Or is that too much for me? Does that make me uncomfortable? And then you need to mitigate those through preparation. We'll share some of the security measures that we've taken and others have taken in our specific circumstances. And decide, and then understand, a big one is understanding the response, because it's not the same.
It's not the same as the United States. And you need to know, you need to plan for what that response actually is going to be, right? When you call 911.
Yeah. Or do you call 911 or do you call a neighbor? Things like that. So
yeah.
We already said, back in Tacoma, we were used to the home invasions, burglaries, the car was broken into, but we did things that seemed very reasonable to us, and still would. We had security cameras, good fencing, we had dogs, that those things didn't seem particularly scary because we had taken steps and we knew what would happen, more or less if we called 911. So how does this apply in Southern Ecuador? Particularly, we are coming from a rural context. It will be different in the city, of course, but we'll try to address that for those of you looking at Loja specifically or other cities. But we do think that understanding these things is wise and prudent before you take steps toward a move potentially, or if you're already in country, this information could be helpful. So
so accepting the risks, right, of where you're moving to. And so when you're interested in living abroad, especially in a non-Western context, I think most people's holdup or most people's concern, right, is security. And we believe that, kind of comes from not really knowing how things work, or just, it's just that unfamiliarity.
Yeah, right? That sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, that vulnerability that people have, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
And so
you're vulnerable with the language. That's huge. We totally get that. You don't know people. And you don't understand how things are done. You may have limited transportation. Those are significant things to consider. So
we like to say you make yourself less vulnerable by educating yourself. And so the first thing we like to say is you understand, if you're considering living somewhere, you need to understand the specific risks of living there, and just ways to adapt to it. And if you don't feel like you can, then obviously it's probably not the right move for you. And so we want to talk specifically about Loja, where we are.
So outside of the city of Loja itself, it's a very rural province. I mean, I guess that can be said for all of Ecuador. Ecuador is very rural outside of the cities or anywhere in the world. Loja is very far removed from Quito and Guayaquil. It's like living in the Alaska bush, and that's not really an exaggeration, except it's bigger, of course, perhaps has more amenities, but no one thinks about us down here. We are down here, way at the bottom of the country. To a lot of, Ecuadorians, the country stops at Cuenca, which is 5 hours, north. And so And that, like, just like in the US, you'll have maybe less law enforcement present, fewer resources, people give you fewer thoughts, and that's something to consider. Like, this beautiful valley is our world, but most of the resources are in the greater urban areas, like the capital.
Yeah, and so like Brittany said, the law enforcement ability to respond, the amount of resources and just bodies that they have, right, in these rural parts of Ecuador is obviously going to be significantly lower than in Guayaquil and Quito and Cuenca and the bigger cities, and that makes sense. It all how they break out resources. You've got a bigger population, you need more officers, and so you got to know that before you move out somewhere rural.
Just
right?
accept it, or don't move, because that's a big thing, that urban rural dichotomy. And then another thing that you need to accept, and this people do not like it, but the fact is foreigners are perceived to be wealthy, and that is not always the case. But you are going to be perceived it, and that it's no one's fault. That's just the reality. That's what media has told people, and you have to accept it and not fight against that. And then you have to take your measures to make yourself safe.
You just got to recognize that you're obviously different. You're here out of the normal context.
You stand out here.
Yes. You can't just blend in with the crowd, generally speaking. And so and Brittany's right. So that's true around the world, not just Ecuador. That's true everywhere. That specifically, Western people moving into other contexts generally are viewed as wealthy. Again, it doesn't matter your status. It's just how you're going to be viewed. So take that into consideration.
Accept it
as you move through life, and as you mitigate and look at your different risks.
And there's some truth to that. Even an American on like a small pension, like, very well may make more money than a lot of their Ecuadorian neighbors. Not all, and generalizations, but that's just a factor to consider. And let's see. Okay, so we live in almost paradise, like where we are, our specific town, like near Vilcabamba, right? It's gorgeous, the natural places, and it has like the kindest, most wonderful people you can imagine. And it's easy to get lulled into thinking that you've stumbled into this perfect land where nothing can go wrong. But people are people everywhere. And you need to, you don't need to be cynical. You don't need to live in fear, but you need to be realistic. So
and I think part of the problem you have in that regard is, you get people who move down to this region, and specifically Vilcabamba.
It's a weird little town. Just is.
It's a unique place, but it's amazing place. It's gorgeous down there. But you've got people who view it as a paradise, as a tranquil, like nothing can go wrong kind of safety from the world. And they don't take any consideration into their safety.
And I don't know if we address it, but a lot of crime that expats get caught up in is expat on expat too. That's something to consider too.
That is true. That can happen.
It does happen.
It does happen.
You get some interesting people here.
So with that, right? So people come down, and you get there's kind of an issue here too, where people who don't involve themselves in the local community, in the local culture, don't do a good job of learning the language, naturally kind of build a barrier, and they kind of are overly suspicious of everyone, right? So they don't get close to anyone at the same time. And so you actually create an inverse security problem for yourself, is that no one knows you and no one necessarily cares, right, about you.
Well, and we'll talk about that as we get to like the steps you can take for sure.
But at the same time, not being cynical and not being like everyone's out to get me. But at the same time, realizing that, you stand out and you need to pay attention and you need to be smart about how you do things.
Anything you need to look at comment-wise, or?
Let's see. Guayaquil to... and JD's saying that in Guayaquil, there's no riots, but right now there's been protests going on in the northern part of the country.
Your head is cut off.
I know. It is what it is.
I like your head.
The northern part of the country, due to initially it was due to a fuel subsidy that was removed by the government, but so there'd been protests
But if you weren't like going to the protest, Like, I mean, you were inconvenienced, but you're not going to get caught up in violence unless you're potentially going to the protest, right?
Yeah, or you're confronting people.
Yeah, I mean, so that, in my mind, that's not so much a security thing.
And it's true. He's saying in Guayaquil, they didn't have that problem at all.
So
but up in the north, right, in the peaceful part, right, they did. And then let's see, what's the travel time from Loja to Cuenca? That's a 4 to 5 hour drive from Loja to Cuenca, depending on road conditions. And hired vehicles do that every day.
Buses. The bus is great. We've done the bus.
Yeah, the bus is fantastic.
It's a beautiful drive. We got snow. No, did we get snowed on?
No,
we got snowed on somewhere else.
No, that was
our friend Quito. Got snowed on though, so that's kind of fun in Ecuador.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, getting distracted off this. So. Okay.
Right. So in our region here in rural Loja, southern Loja, your principal security risk is robbery, either opportunistic theft, such as pickpockets, which not a lot of that. We totally have our phones out all the time, out and about when we're in Loja. It's not a crazy thing. But of course, if someone has a chance, if you leave something unattended, it's going to be gone, most likely. We didn't get a phone back from the bus though. So even that's a generalization.
Yeah, we did leave a cell phone on the bus.
And I heard of someone, getting a purse stolen, and so that can happen. But more concerning is, planned robberies, which could be anywhere from the theft of a dozen chickens, which to me kind of sounds comical, but it's not comical if that's your livelihood, of course. Or, the extreme end of things is, of course, a targeted and sometimes violent home invasion. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So those are the main security risks. Now, there are other risks here that we'd like to get into another time, natural disasters, health emergencies, all of those things are, you need to follow a similar sort of pattern, or step process. But today we're talking security more. So, like I said, Loja is a very safe city. Like, never, ever felt threatened, nervous, on edge, in that city. Now, I can't even imagine feeling that way.
I mean, but it's still a city.
Yeah.
And so you still have opportunistic thieves and other people with malintent.
And I'd watch out, especially if we were out at night.
Sure.
We're vigilant too, just naturally. But
yeah, but it's not one of those cities where you're in fear by any means. But you should still be smart.
Yes. Don't listen to us and say, but they said I could come and like I would be fine. Like, no, we're not saying that. So like you could forget to lock your car doors in Loja, and most likely nothing's going to be gone, unless you leave it out in plain sight maybe. But it feels very safe, and it really is very safe. Like very little violent crime in the city itself. Those home invasions we'll talk about, those don't happen in the city. They don't even happen in town. So, and most of the crime, by and large in Loja, you can almost always count on it relating to drugs or a domestic issue. So very, very little random crime. So now Vilcabamba, we've already said, is a special kind of place. It's different. It's an odd little town with almost two totally separate populations between, foreigners and locals. I do not like that. We don't like that. I don't like that for a number of reasons. I don't like that feel. Sometimes I wish there were fewer foreigners that were more integration, because you don't always get that, and that's a whole different topic. But there's nowhere else like it in Ecuador.
Yeah, cool.
It's not even too many places in the world, really.
Well, I think Cuenca is big enough, and
Cuenca is a big city, so those like the expat population is
dispersed.
And Vilcabamba it's really concentrated.
The coast too.
And no one minds the foreigners in Vilcabamba as long as you're pleasant and polite. You support the economy, and so there's not like a lot of foreigner hate. But there's unfortunately a lot of the population just kind of hold themselves separately, and I think that's regretful. But that's also not so much what this video is about. So
yeah, and so Vilca is very rural, right? You consider it's a rural town, rural community. All of again, we'll just say generally all of the communities of Loja, rural Loja, the province of Loja, are the same. Rural, there's lower amounts of police and other kind of law enforcement and stuff like that around.
Yeah, it's a sweet, sleepy little town.
Yeah, and so a lot of people come here and get lulled into a sense of security. And the weather in this region is amazing. And so lots of people live and want to live a very indoor, outdoor kind of California lifestyle. And so with that comes a whole lot of security risks that they just are completely naive about. I should say things are different now.
Yeah, I think so.
I think people have woken up a lot. But so for many, many years,
Mosquito.
there were zero problems. And so people were living very rurally, very isolated. They had open air living, right? Like there was no security. You could easily walk into their houses kind of situation. May or may not have had dogs, but just no thought to their own security. And like we said, the police can do really very little. And especially when you've got a group of people who don't know the language too well and live quite rurally, it just makes you much more vulnerable in that situation. So that to set the stage as to kind of what happened a couple of years ago when there was a spat of home invasions down here, which by and large too, we think were being done. I think it was a mix of people, but it wasn't all Ecuadorian. The criminals, I think, were a mix of immigrants or like Venezuelan and stuff like that. People who kind of move through, and as they travel through, commit crime as they're heading down to Chile, of all places. So, go ahead.
At the same time, though, if you look on one of like the Ecuador, Vilcabamba Facebook pages, you go back 15 years, 10 years. The cycle has, it's not a new thing in some regards. Like this has happened. There's been periods of heightened crime before in the valley, and there will be again. That's just because you have the concentrated population of foreigners is a huge part of it, and so.
That, and like I said, I think people get very, very lax, and new people come in, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the population shifts because a lot of the people who come down to this region kind of come and go. It's a lot of transient population, and so anyways, so with all of that said, like I said, it's the same kind of protections that you would put in place if you lived in rural U.S. It's the same kind of things you do here. And again, the whole point of your security, right, is making yourself less of a target, less of an attractive target, and then also setting up
the layers
of security and kind of protocols, right, for when something does happen. And so again, that none of those things really existed for a lot of people at that time. And they, like I said, there were some terrible situations where there was, home invasions where people were tied up for many hours.
Yeah, this was a couple of years ago now, but maybe for a period of 6 months, like there was fear among the foreign population, like rightly so. Elderly, almost all elderly expats living, just the two of them or maybe a single person living rurally, out of town rural, in an isolated location.
Away from neighbors.
Typically with few security measures. And I'm not like victim blaming at all.
No.
Because in the ideal world, you shouldn't have to have any security measures, of course. And so thankfully, many shared their stories and the community was able to learn, and the community, we fought back, and it's like, no, we're not accepting this. And, our Ecuadorian neighbors, stepped up and they said, no, we're not okay with this. And so right now, it's a time of tremendous peace, and it has been for a while. But this could happen again. And, based on history, there could be another period where people are targeted here or in some other, context. And so it's just smart to be prudent and aware. Again, most people are not, threatened, but if you, especially in certain demographics, not to be naive, this is not paradise. Don't be lulled into, thinking that you won't be taken advantage of.
False sense of security.
Yeah.
Because it's an amazing place.
It is, yeah.
And we absolutely love it. But you also need to be smart.
Yeah.
And so with that, how about we move on to the mitigation?
Okay.
So knowing that, right, if you want to come to Ecuador, by and large, especially in the city, right? A lot of times in the city, you're living with so many neighbors, or you're living up in an apartment building and stuff like that, where none of those kind of risks apply because they're really not something that's ever done.
Yeah, they almost these evil. They're evil, right? Men, or I don't know. Maybe there were some women. You hear rumors, but they thrive on. They need isolation. They can't, and so people in town are not threatened by this. You have to live, and we live rurally, right? We live out of town. We do not have a lot of neighbors, and so we were particularly.
No, that's not true at all. we do live outside of town, but we have neighbors, and we have a whole string of neighbors below us that we all have.
I mean, but yeah, we don't like live in a neighborhood kind of.
Yeah, we don't have a neighbor literally right next door,
yeah,
but
like
we've
in
got
town.
tons of people around us we could even yell to if we
Yeah,
had
that's
to.
true.
And so we're not isolated to where like, so one of the things we're talking about isolated is these are people who intentionally live somewhere where you can't see their house.
Way up on a mountain,
you
maybe.
can't see them. And they don't know any of their people who live close to them. Whereas we know literally everyone around us. And we're in communication with everyone around us, right? And so even though we're set apart outside of our actual little pueblo itself, out of the town itself, we're still very close, and we still have neighbors. And because we looked at properties before that were way up out in the mountains, it's like, this is not okay. It's too far. No one's going to be there to help you.
Well, and some people who were targeted, some of the elderly people, like did live more in our context, you know, but they didn't have the systems in place. All you need is a few seconds to send out an alert, right? That's what we say. All you need is to buy yourself a few seconds. And so, unfortunately, you know, for several of the couples targeted by these, you know, a gang of people, like they weren't able to pull that off. And so, but we'll talk about how to get, no matter where you are in the world, give yourself those few seconds that are so important. So anyway, that one period of time a couple of years ago really was a major reality check because it had been a while, I think, maybe 10 years, maybe less, since, you know, there'd been a string of crimes. And so, you know, foreigners were waking up to the risks there, and locals were rallying around, and locals could be targeted too. I don't want to say it's only against foreigners. And law enforcement was being very, you know, proactive and cooperative and working with people. And so a lot of like really good initiatives have come out of this time period, which makes us feel really, you know, confident about local security moving forward. So let's see.
Lots of good stuff happened in response to it. And people organized, people created groups and neighborhood security teams and all kinds of things that were very beneficial and helped.
Do you want to, should we say that?
What is it?
Here?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So in this context, like even back in Arizona, where we lived before, where I'm from, some friends of ours were killed
in their home
by a violent home invasion in a really safe rural part of Arizona. And the guy who did it, he was just, you know, a lunatic on drugs. And there's absolutely nothing they could have done right differently to respond to that. And instead, it's there are, you know, drugs here, and there are people who take drugs, but not many, and it's nothing like the U.S. And so, like I said, it's not random here. It's very logical, and so you can respond to that logical, right? You can do things. You can take steps to lower that risk. And so
let's talk about those steps.
So home security, right? Like we said, you're wanting to make yourself as undesirable as a target as possible, right? And to give yourself as much time to get out warning to others, a call for help, right? And so your efforts in terms of your home itself should be focused on that. And so there's so much we could get into, and I won't go into great detail on all it, because you can find information all over YouTube on home security, because all of it applies. It doesn't matter where you live. It's the same basic principles. But layered security, right? Having, I can't even say the word, rings, I'll just say rings, rings of security, right? As the closer you get to your house, right? And so your outer ring, right, is fencing and lighting. And then you get in closer and you've got, let's say, dogs and more fencing. And then you come up closer to the house, you've got more lights, you've got cameras, you've got a siren. And you get to the house itself, right? You've got door locks. We have these nifty door alarms.
Oh, yeah. Should I grab one of those?
No, it's okay. Nifty door alarms. We've got the cameras, the works, right? And we've got our dogs in and outside of the house and all the above. And so the idea, right, is to give yourself as much advanced warning as you can that there's an issue, that someone's there.
Just enough time to send out a WhatsApp message or set off a siren. That's it.
You just need a few seconds. You just need a few seconds. And so that's the principle, right? So you want to look at your home and you want to see, like, okay, where are people going to enter? Because they're not going to come down your driveway. They're going to come from sides and dark corners and all that kind of stuff.
And they're going to, you know, case it out ahead of time.
Most likely you'll be cased. And so, yeah, so you got to think about those things. You got to think about, you know, I don't have any fencing, but okay, maybe I do need fencing, or maybe I do need certain types of lights, right? Floodlights, motion lights, that kind of stuff. All those just kind of basic home security tips.
Yeah, nothing wild or crazy.
Nothing too wild or crazy. Like I said, you want to, and you want those to be obvious too, right? You want, if someone's going to come by looking at your place, they're going to be like, too
moving
much
on.
trouble, moving on, right?
And we don't think about this all the time. It's not like security is always like the main thought. You know, it may sound like we're a little, I don't know, paranoid even, or, you know, it's like you set stuff up and you have the occasional conversation and you keep things maintained, but you know, you lived your life. So.
Well, yeah, of course. And we don't live in fear at all.
That's what I want to say.
We live realistically. And like I said, I take the same exact measures as I did in the United States. And so, and again, this is my world, so I'm always thinking about this stuff, but and I do that so she doesn't have to, right?
Yeah, thanks. And again, this is applicable for anywhere, and you know, common sense stuff, not Ecuador specific, but. And
so again, going back to what happened in the past here was people didn't have a lot of those things set up, right? And so they were obvious and easy targets in that regard. And so that's just one piece, right? Like looking at your home, fortifying your home. And that's not like barring every door and every window and, you know, making an impenetrable fortress, which of course works. We actually had a friend here in another town who had essentially a fortress, and literally the guys were outside of her house for an hour trying to break in. And she was elderly, single by herself. So she was the worst, like she's like the prime target, and they would have never gotten in, but she had hearing loss. She didn't even know they were outside.
And she opened the door.
She opened the door for them because she was trying to find her dog, and that's how they got into her place.
Super sad.
Super sad.
But that, I mean, and you know, we say that to kind of show like there are things you can do. The systems work when you do them correctly. You know, and then the human error, of course, you know, that's a thing, and that can happen to any of us. And so we say, so security starts with knowledge, right? Knowing the risks, like we said, accepting those and mitigating those. So also there's common sense. And so we will see things that, like we've said, Facebook is a really big thing in Ecuador. And you will see on, you know, Facebook posts or someone might make like, hey, what's a really good way to deposit a large amount of cash in Vilcabamba? And you're just like, oh no, like, why would you say that? Like, you know, that's a common sense kind of mistake that, you know, you need to not say things like that. You need to be careful.
You need to have operational security, right, as a mindset in that regard. And again, like we said, being a foreigner in any country, you already stand out. And so you should not broadcast anything like that on the internet ever in general, period. But yeah, so you've got a lot of people who just don't think those things through and so as you're living your life, don't post about your location, right? Like, hey, I'm going to this place, my home's going to be empty, or, you know,
looking to buy a car, cash in hand.
You know, just kind of the same things like Facebook Marketplace in the United States, right? Where you'd meet someone at
a police station.
Outside a police station,
so that you don't
public parking lot, right? Yeah. So there's a safety measure there.
Just common sense.
Yeah, just common sense.
One thing we actually see a lot of is no matter where you live, like be careful about the people you invite into your home. And like we are very careful regarding a taxi is a major example here. Like we have a handful of like deeply trusted taxi drivers that we think the world of, and we don't have anyone else, you know, come to our home. There's not just because, the taxi drivers might be bad, but I think foreigners have the tendency to think anyone who is being nice to you is your friend and has your best interests at mind. And that is not always the case. Just because the taxi driver seems happy to see you and is chatty does not mean he is your friend necessarily. So
and not to say anything bad about taxi drivers.
No, we love our taxi drivers.
But I mean, just in conversation, right? Like, let's say someone's like, oh yeah, I saw this thing today, or drove this person to their house today and saw this, just nonchalantly, like not even trying to pass information, but the wrong person hears about it, right? And then chooses you as a target, that kind of thing. And so being careful.
That goes, you know, someone cleaning your home, someone doing a repair, someone delivering something, as much as that's in your control, like be careful. You cannot be too careful about that. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And so with that, like I said, these guys live in our community
Our
and we're
taxi
good friends with
drivers.
them as well.
And they're
right?
actually tremendous assets to the security of our community.
Yeah. Well, so we'll talk about that when we talk about our security
Yeah,
plan
this
for our
is so
town
cool.
itself, because they are a huge piece of that. But this goes along with the next point of being a good neighbor, right? Which is one of our
Huge.
biggest
This
points.
is what we would say is like the number one security factor. Like we are convinced of that, actually.
Yeah. So like I said, you want people to care about you. You want to care about others and have them care about you, right? And we say that is one of our biggest pieces to this is when you're up and down these mountains, right? There's always people know like these are small towns. Everyone talks, everyone knows everything, right? And the best thing you can do for yourself is be part of your community, be known, be friendly, and be neighborly.
Kind.
Yeah, be kind.
You don't need to have perfect Spanish to say, good morning and smile at someone.
Mhm.
You don't need, or to bring someone a little treat or laugh with someone. Like those things are huge for building goodwill.
And like we like to say that there's been a couple instances where we've had stuff going on at the house that were like we were setting off fireworks or we were doing something innocuous, something fun, not any danger, but neighbors hearing noises and immediately contacting us, hey, are you okay? What's going on?
Or we had one of the dogs was like constantly setting off a camera that had an alarm on it.
Yes.
And someone, the cousin of someone that we're close with, I hear their alarm going off immediately, he immediately calls, everything okay up there? And we're like, oh yeah, wow, I didn't know they could hear that. And not that we're like, oh, we're so great, people care about us, but no, we have made an effort, and we are nice, and people can tell that we like them and that we like it here, and that's really means a lot. So
well, yeah, but like we were saying, the best thing you can do is to have people care for you, right? And this is a community, and the response to things here happens as a community.
Yeah, and
right?
they'll care, even if you are kind of a jerk.
They don't want
bad guys hanging around and stuff, but you'll do yourself so many favors, and your whole life will be richer for a number of reasons if you are intentional about building up community in your immediate area. But security is certainly
the point is
one of
people will
those.
be looking out for you specifically. And they know the risks. They know that foreigners are more of a target, right, than they are, and generally speaking.
So,
go ahead.
I guess maybe you were going to talk about this later, but there was during this that 6-month period or whatever it was. I don't think we had a car for a chunk of time. We had car issues for quite a while. And we were coming back to town in a taxi, and this wasn't too long, I think, after we moved to our town. And as soon as we got into our town, we could tell that something was up. There was a feel. It was nighttime and people were out. Like everyone was out of their homes and they were standing at the street. And we were like, what's going on? And our taxi driver immediately began talking with another taxi driver and learned that there had been an attempted robbery of a foreign couple not far from where we live. And the town was not okay with that.
Well, so the protocol for the town was as soon as something like that happens, everyone leaves their houses. People block roads. The guys all come out together. They get into taxis and they start driving around. Everyone in the back.
Lots of back roads, lots of mountain trails, lots of escape route. And so they were patrolling and they were watching the whole town. And we were pretty new, like I said, but they, we had a bunch of guys in the back of the taxi and who were coming up, and they checked our property thoroughly before they left us because they wanted to make sure, that nothing was wrong, that everything was okay. Like we felt so cared about. And that was a kind of an eye opener for us. And it was very humbling. Like, wow, they are watching out for us and they care about us. They care about each other. They care about security in the town.
Well, they care about their town. And so,
and that's not atypical. Like, we're super blessed. Our town's awesome, but you will find that in other places too. But that was a really neat thing to see, actually.
Things function here by neighborhood, by barrio, right? Barrios are very important, and that's your first go-to. And it stretches out from barrio into neighboring barrios into the whole community. But the community is
especially in bigger areas, particularly because here
even
town's
here,
small.
Even here. And so when we started working on the security projects that we've been doing here, took all that in as okay, this is how they respond let's make that, let's emphasize that. Let's build on top of that, right?
For the town-wide project,
Project.
not
So,
us
because
specifically.
we'd seen in response to this as well, foreigners trying to
good
create
intention.
good intention, but trying to create and force their own initiatives.
And it's like, that's not how it works here. They wanted, foreigner like led initiatives. They're like, oh, I call you and you call. Like, you're talking people across different towns, not at the barrio level at all. And
one of the confusions people have, they don't understand how life functions here, right? They don't understand that literally your neighborhood is your world. And so they're looking at another town, 2 towns over.
Yeah, like what are those people going to do for you when it comes down to it?
Calling each other and trying to figure out security without talking to their neighbors.
Like, no, you gotta, they've been doing this a long time here, long before the foreigners came, and you need to work off of their systems. But okay, we already talked about the tangible things, cameras, fencing, things like that. Dogs, dogs are a really big thing in the compo. Almost everyone has dogs. Highly recommend having a dog or 2 or more.
And
huge.
Having them in different places. And
not always predictable places.
Yes. So one of the tactics is these guys will sadly throw out a piece of poisoned meat beforehand to try to take your dog out of the picture. Okay.
Because dogs are a big deal.
Dogs are a big deal. And so that's why we keep our dogs in varying places and varying stages.
They kind of keep themselves.
Well, sure. But
they're never all outside or all inside at the same time.
It's very intentional how we have our dogs. But dogs are the number one alarm system, right? Like, they know when something's wrong immediately, and they sound the alarm. And not just you, but the bad guys and your neighbors, right, know that something's wrong. And there's been multiple times where dogs barking have set off a neighbor to realize something was going on at their neighbor's house, and then hitting a siren, right?
Yeah.
And so dogs are a huge piece.
dogs are big. And so layers of security. Okay. One other thing to keep in mind is have a plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but like in the moment you might panic and you might not think like, oh, you bought yourself those seconds. Who do you message? Like who's your first response? Or what do you do? Where do you go? Are you going to lock yourself in a room of your house? Are you going to try to get out of the house? I mean, this all sounds so like scary, and I don't want to scare people. I think, it's just, have something figured out ahead of time. If you have kids, don't scare them, but talk to them, talk to them realistically in the daylight when things are, practical, like hey, if this happens, this is what you should do.
Well, you have plans, like you'd have plans for a fire drill, like you'd have plans for anything like that. It's the same thing. You need to lay out what you're going to do in response to something, and work that through, right? And just have that as something that you've got in your mind to begin with, because we said you'll panic if something does happen. And so if you've got a plan in place, it's way better than not having a plan in place.
Yeah. And it may all like fall apart anyway. You can have all the layers, right, and all the plans, and stuff happens. But at least you're taking those steps, and I think it dramatically reduces the risk of anything happening. So I think we're moving on to understand the response. I know we've been over an hour now.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. So understanding the response, right, is very key. And this is very similar, like I said, to a lot of places of rural America or other parts of the U.S. or even major cities in the U.S. now, where you call the police and they either don't come or they come an hour later. And so that kind of situation, and medical, right? Same thing here. Like it's usually recommended, like medical call, you call a trusted taxi driver before you call an ambulance, because you'll get the taxi driver long before the ambulance.
Out in the middle, in the rural area. In the rural areas. Sure.
So that kind of same mindset should apply here, the same. And so understanding the response, understanding what happens in an emergency where you live, who comes out, who helps, right? Who you need to contact. There's a 911, literal 911 service.
But
it goes to Loja, to the city, to a 911 center. But they have to take that information, that whatever they pull from you, right? And they feed that to the local station. And then that local station has to try to figure out what they're talking about, and then come to wherever you are.
And then again, if like they don't know like where we live, there aren't really addresses in rural Ecuador. Like they cannot just plug us into a GPS. Like, I mean, they literally wouldn't even know how to find our house potentially, which is why the community response needs to be your initial go-to.
Yeah.
Well, actually, what do we say here? You are your first response.
Yeah. So the whole security discussion can be boiled down to security is your responsibility. Your responsibility. If you move to Ecuador, if you move to anywhere, it should be and is your responsibility first of all. Now here, because there is a lack of resources in terms of law enforcement response and things like that, you need to take that into account and realize, okay, I need to do something. I need to take on the responsibility to figure this out. Because no one's going to do it for you, right? Like you're not going to pick up the phone and the cavalry's not going to show up.
We're in Bush, Alaska, remember?
Yeah,
so
unless you set that up.
Yeah, and that's where we come to number. You're the first response, but your community is your second response.
Yes. So neighbors and community are the key.
Let's see. Okay, so we've talked about how Blake is the gringo liaison for our little town's community system, and that's why there are quite a few foreigners dotting the mountains around our little town. Many don't speak Spanish, or aren't necessarily really active or involved in the community, and so they needed someone like Blake to try to, to bring people on board, because people want to be part of an initiative and on board. Security is everyone's deal in the town. And so, but this is an Ecuadorian led thing, which I think is important in our town. It's privately funded, right?
Well, here, I'll describe the system.
Okay.
So
it's your baby kind of.
Yeah. And so like we said before, we had that incident where the whole town came out, everyone was engaged in responding to this attempted home invasion. And so what happens here is now we've kind of created a situation where we've organized each neighborhood. Each neighborhood now has response protocols. Each neighborhood meets together and talks about these things. We built out a community-wide siren system. And so now trusted members of the community in every neighborhood throughout the town have access to set off either specific sirens or the entire system, where literally everyone across the town will be alerted that there's something happening, as well as created groups in which we interact, share information in real time. And that group is actually now associated directly with the local police department.
So they're monitoring it live.
And so they're monitoring it live. And so we never call 911 anymore. We will literally message directly to the police, hey, this is happening. We need a police response, at this town, this place,
and it's literally just like, oh, there's, someone I don't recognize out, and the police will come.
Yeah. And so we have protocols in place. And so the community is vigilant. The community is looking out for each other. The community knows that the community comes first, right? So your neighbors and the people who live in your town, they're going to be the ones there before anyone else. And so we've got protocols. I won't get into details, but so when the sirens go off, everyone knows to check the groups and to head outside to their corresponding protocol, right? And we're not saying like people are, running up and trying to take out bad guys, but we're creating an environment in this town where bad guys can come and they can see this town isn't worth our time.
It's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent measure more than anything, but
it's also really effective.
It's been extremely effective because it has served not just in response to security threats, home invasions, and whatever, but in response to natural disasters during our fires,
health emergencies,
during floods, during health emergencies, you name it. It's our emergency response system that we've developed for our town.
Sure, it would be great if the government did all that, but this is, Ecuador, and it's community led, and the government does its own things, of course. But if you want something to get done, you kind of make it happen. In
major intersections of town, the government does have its own cameras that they installed that tie back to the 911 center in Loja, and those are monitored 24 hours a day. But we also added our own private town-only specific cameras that we monitor ourselves.
Which is great to have that redundancy too.
It's a redundancy, and as I said, we want to keep everything as local as possible, and everyone is invested in that system, and so it's been very, very successful due to that. Now we have gaps, and of course we have issues, and we're evolving, but that's been one of the positive things to come out of all of this. And I said we didn't reinvent the wheel; we just took what people did already and made it better.
Yeah. So I guess we'll kind of conclude. We're so grateful for
open up for a little more questions.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, or feel free to send those over now, or we will. You can post questions, I think, on this video at a later time, and we'll see them, of course. So yeah, we really appreciate you tuning in on this Wednesday evening, listening to us go on and on and on. But
and like I said, if you've got specific, so on our website, averagefamilyabroad.com, you'll find our email contact.
And we're on social media.
We're on social media. So feel free to reach out if you've got specific questions or anything like that. Like I said, I've got a lot I could get into detail on specifically on, things to do and how to do things. But yeah, if there's any further questions in chat, we'd love to answer those.
But
and to 10 by, let's see, the Loja to Zamora question. It's much faster to go from Loja to Zamora because it's literally just up and over the mountain, as long as the road's open.
It's an insane drive, though, totally as an aside.
Super cool.
You go
drive.
from 9,000 feet to 3,000 feet in 30 minutes, 30 minutes,
yeah,
just
quick.
Crazy.
Down into the jungle.
Going from the mountains. Loja, there's not a lot separating jungle from mountain here. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Loja to Zamora is much faster than Cuenca to Zamora. So Loja to Zamora is just an hour and a half.
It's quite
as long as the roads are open.
Yeah,
there can be a lot of problems in the rainy season with the road to Zamora itself, just because there's waterfalls all along the road.
Yeah, it's like a one big waterfall.
Yeah. So that can be a problem, but it's a lot closer. Cuenca, like I said, is a good 4 to 5 hours or more, depending on conditions north of Loja.
So in conclusion, we feel safe here. We wouldn't have moved our family here, stayed here. If things got horrible, we would leave. We have those plans in place, right? I mean, we don't want to. This is our home. We belong here, but and we've taken prudent measures to enhance our family safety. Nothing crazy. It's common sense stuff. We're not idealists. We're not naive. The risks are different than those in Tacoma, and we prefer the risks here, especially with the rewards, of life here and just how rich and wonderful it is. So we have this thought, you can chase safety and security all across the globe and search for your perfect paradise, and you can step outside and get hit by a bus. There's you need to be able to live fully wherever you are, wherever you, whether that's by choice or by birth, live fully from the mountains of southern Ecuador to a high rise in Dubai. And ironically, living that full life will increase your security no matter where you are, since so much of that does stem from from community. So,
yeah. So, 10, your question: cost for a modest rental home that is furnished in Loja. So I'd say you're looking at probably around $200 for a furnished place in Loja, maybe less, depending on the quality. I mean, you can go anywhere from $100 to $500, right? Depending on what you choose. Nacho.
He's letting us know he can hear his speaker down.
Speaking of dogs.
A ways away. Yes, you're a good security, Nacho.
Good job. Yeah, so coming in advanced. Yeah, so yeah, Loja is pretty affordable. And lots of options for rent if you want to get him. Yeah.
What are you doing? Hi. Yes, you're a good boy.
Dogs are a wonderful thing to have. And they're also
come here.
great to interrupt the live stream.
Come see.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions at the moment, we'll go ahead. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah.
There's Nacho.
Oh, 7 and 800. Oh, yeah. 10, I would look at Facebook Marketplace for sure. I would try to find a trusted, there's a couple of Facebook groups, Loja specific Facebook groups, not south of Loja, but Loja, the city itself. And I would look at those because those would be much more helpful in terms of finding something. Because 7 and 800 is way more.
I mean, you could pay that much.
You could pay that much easily,
but you don't have to pay that much. So,
we knew a family that rented an entire osteria, an entire
little resort,
resort place with swimming pools and waterfalls and stuff, and they took the whole place for $1,500 a month. So,
anything else?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, you can rewatch this, and it should post immediately as soon as we're done.
Yeah. So watch for some cool videos coming up. Buy some awesome Ecuadorian coffee at averagefamilyabroad.com, wherever you are.
And note on that, I put a note on the product listings for the coffee, but those won't ship out until after November 3rd because they're in transit to the United States. And so, but when you buy them, they will be shipped after that date.
perfect
and
for
USPS. Right?
Christmas purchases. So
Yeah.
yeah, be safe and be wise and live life fully.
Yeah, 10, like I said, we just like to say that no butterflies. It's just, need to take security seriously and just not ignore it. Like I said, life is really, really pretty peaceful here and laid back. And it's not, again, you should just know that, anything can happen anywhere, but being smart and taking prudent precautions is, will give you much more peace of mind. So, all right. Very good. All right. Well, with that, yeah, AFA Coffee. That's right. And so, yeah, it's up on the website as De La Dera Coffee is the brand name. And so you'll see it there. We absolutely love it. We
Yeah,
hope you do too.
it's really good.
We're converting all of our Lohano friends to our coffee. So our kids' school teachers, we gifted some too. And one of our daughter's teacher, or one of the teachers was
Quizzing our
daughter today. How do you
is
make
it
your
so
coffee
delicious?
so good?
And our daughter hates coffee, so she's like, I think it's gross. Sorry, can't help you. But
very cool. Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Well, yeah, have a good night.
Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys on the next video. I gotta stop it from here.